Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. When talking about Jewish groups, most people immediately think of Ashkenazi Jews spread across Europe, or Sephardic Jews with their roots in the Iberian Peninsula. However, there is a lesser-known group whose lineage has remained incredibly close to the ancient Israelites, preserving its genetic heritage in almost an untouched way. They never migrated to Europe in large numbers, nor did they significantly mix with Western or African populations. I am talking about the Mizrahi Jews. If this name doesn't sound familiar to you, get ready for a fascinating journey. Let's explore their origins, culture, and how they represent a living link to the Jewish people's past in the Middle East. The origin of the Mizrahi Jews. Are they the true Jews? Today, Ashkenazi Jews are undoubtedly the most widely recognized Jewish group. Their physical characteristics often make them easily identifiable, especially in contrast with Sephardic Jews. However, there is a group that remains almost unknown to most people, the Mizrahi Jews. In the visual comparison we present, you can see the striking distinction between a Mizrahi Jew, whose lineage has remained in the Middle East without significant genetic mixing with Europeans, and an Ashkenazi Jew, whose ancestry includes European influences over the centuries. This difference not only highlights the diversity within the Jewish people, but also underscores how distinct the paths of these groups have been. Mizrahi Jews, known in Hebrew as Yehudei Mizrah, are the true Eastern Jews, direct descendants of the ancient biblical Israelites. Unlike Ashkenazim and Sephardim, who migrated to Europe and other parts of the world, the Mizrahim remained in the heart of the Middle East, preserving customs, traditions, and an identity deeply rooted in the history of their homeland. Their migrations, when they occurred, were limited to neighboring regions, including parts of the Maghreb and some areas of Asia. Although often forgotten or scarcely recognized, the Mizrahi Jews carry with them a heritage that goes directly back to biblical times, serving as a living link to the ancient Israelites who inhabited the Holy Land thousands of years ago. The term Mizrahim is, above all, a socio-political and ethnic designation that arose after the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. In Hebrew, Mizrahim means Orientals, and in its contemporary usage, it specifically refers to Jews from the Middle East and the Maghreb. In the modern context, this classification encompasses Mashriki Jews, from the Arabic Masharqi, meaning Eastern, a group that historically lived in countries like Yemen, Iraq, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Kurdistan, Iran, and Egypt. In addition to them, this identity also includes Jews from the Maghreb, who lived for centuries in Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco. What makes this categorization even more interesting is the fact that before the creation of the State of Israel, Jews from these regions did not identify as a distinct subgroup within Judaism. In the Middle East, and even in pre-1948 Palestine, Jewish communities were recognized according to their localities or specific traditions, without the need for a unifying label like Mizrahim. It was only with the establishment of the new state and the subsequent need to classify its diverse Jewish populations that this identity was consolidated. Thus, Mizrahi Jews are not only an ethnic group, but also the product of a recent historical and political framing, which seeks to group under a single term those who, for millennia, lived as Eastern Jews amidst Arab and Persian cultures. For Jews from the Middle East and the Maghreb, identity was clear. They were simply Jews. Before the creation of the State of Israel and the imposition of socio-political categories such as Mizrahim, there was no need for such distinctions. Each Jewish community was recognized by its locality or tradition rather than as part of a separate group within the Jewish people. Interestingly, Mizrahi Jews shared many cultural and aesthetic similarities with Sephardic Jews. Their clothing, customs, and even certain aspects of their religious traditions had more in common with Sephardic Jews than with Ashkenazi Jews. Sephardic Jews, who were expelled from Spain and Portugal during the Inquisition, as well as those who lived in Al-Andalus, the region of the Iberian Peninsula under Arab rule for centuries, absorbed many cultural influences from the peoples of the Middle East and North Africa. This led them to preserve, in many ways, a way of life reminiscent of the ancient Israelites. This, in no way, diminishes the importance of Ashkenazi Jews, who are also legitimate descendants of the people of Israel and played a crucial role in the preservation and evolution of Judaism. However, when looking at historical, linguistic, and cultural similarities, it becomes clear that Sephardic Jews had a greater affinity with Mizrahi Jews than with Ashkenazi Jews. Both groups, living among Arab and Islamic societies, maintain traditions that date back to biblical times, making them a living reflection of the heritage of the ancient Israelites. The history of the Mizrahi Jews dates back to one of the oldest and continuous Jewish lineages, rooted in the heart of the Middle East. Their diaspora began around the 6th century BCE, when Babylon, under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, destroyed the first temple in Jerusalem and took a large part of the Jewish population into captivity. This event, known as the Babylonian exile, marked the beginning of the dispersion of the Jews beyond the land of Israel. While some remained in Babylon, establishing one of the most influential Jewish communities of antiquity, others fled to Egypt, where there had already been a significant Jewish presence since the time of the prophet Jeremiah. Over the centuries, the diaspora expanded further into the Middle East and the Maghreb, giving rise to the communities we now know as Mizrahim. In the Maghreb, Jews settled among Semitic peoples, such as the Berbers and Arabs, who had already inhabited the region for time immemorial. Additionally, some Jewish communities settled in Persian lands, Yemen, and various parts of Asia Minor. North Africa, in particular, has always been an ethnic melting pot, where Semitic and Indo-European peoples, descendants of Japheth, coexisted since ancient times. Although there were Hamitic tribes of African origin living in the region, the cultural and population predominance in North Africa has always been linked to Semitic and Indo-European peoples. Historical evidence, such as ancient murals from Libya and other parts of the Maghreb, shows human figures that clearly differ from the Cushitic African peoples, displaying features closer to those of the peoples of the Middle East and the Mediterranean. This reinforces the idea that the Jews who migrated to this region encountered a population whose ethnic and cultural composition had already been strongly influenced by Semitic peoples, which may have contributed to the preservation of Jewish identity in the Maghreb over the centuries. With the expansion of Islam in the 7th century CE, Jews living under Muslim rule were classified as dhimmis. The term dhimmi, dhumai, referred to non-Muslims who lived in Islamic territories, granting them the right to practice their religions, but under certain restrictions and a lower legal status. Muslims recognized Jews as people of the book, al-Kitab, a title that also included Christians because they shared a monotheistic tradition rooted in the scriptures. Due to this recognition and the historical kinship between Arabs and Jews, both belonging to the Semitic branch, the Jews were allowed to maintain their religious practices. However, this tolerance came with limitations. They were required to pay the jizya, a special tax imposed on non-Muslims, and were prohibited from holding certain political or military positions. An interesting aspect of this relationship is that despite their subordinate status, there were periods of relatively peaceful coexistence between Jews and Muslims. In some regions, such as Islamic Spain, Al-Andalus, and parts of the Ottoman Empire, Jews found refuge and even thrived compared to the more hostile treatment they received in Christian Europe. This ambiguous coexistence may have been facilitated by the perception of a common ancestry. According to biblical tradition, both Arabs and Jews are descendants of Abraham, the Arabs through Ishmael and the Jews through Isaac. This ancestral connection may have helped maintain a certain level of respect between the two communities, even though Jews were always in a secondary social position within the Islamic world. Throughout history, Jews in the Maghreb formed vibrant and active communities, leaving a significant mark on the societies in which they lived. From large cities to small villages, they played essential roles in trade, craftsmanship, and the cultural development of the region. Their contributions spanned from jewelry making, weaving, and medicine to finance, making them crucial figures in the local economy. Maghrebi Jewish communities developed a unique identity, blending ancient Jewish influences with local traditions. Their religious practices gained distinctive characteristics, reflected in customs, cuisine, music, and even clothing, which often incorporated elements typical of Berber and Arab cultures. This fusion of influences created a rich and distinct cultural heritage, still observable in the descendants of the Maghrebi Jewish diaspora. The relationship between Jews and Muslims in the Maghreb varied over time and depending on the political context. In periods of stability, Jews were able to thrive and even collaborate with Muslim society, holding prominent positions as merchants, interpreters, and advisors. In other times, however, they faced persecution, discrimination, and restrictions imposed by Islamic authorities. Depending on the ruler in power, policies could range from relative tolerance to severe oppression. Despite these adversities, many Jewish communities in the Maghreb managed to preserve their cultural and religious identity over the centuries. Even with political and social changes, they maintained their customs and traditions, passing down their heritage from generation to generation. This demonstrates not only their resilience, but also the depth of the Mizrahi Jews' connection to their ancestral roots. Though Jews in the Middle East and the Maghreb had deep ties to the regions they lived in, they were recognized as a distinct community. In the Arab world, for example, even though they absorbed local cultural influences, adopting variants of Arabic and developing their own versions of cuisine, they did not incorporate Arab identity. On the contrary, Jews from these regions, even those with converted ancestors, identified as part of the Jewish people as a whole, preserving their heritage as descendants of the ancient Israelites. Regarding the languages spoken by Mizrahi Jews in ancient times and today, the native language of this group was Aramaic. Since ancient times, Aramaic has been the language of the Israelite people. For example, Abraham spoke Aramaic, as he was from Aram and Paddan Aram, regions where this language was predominant. His son Isaac, upon marrying Rebekah, a woman from Paddan Aram, also spoke Aramaic. Thus Jacob, known as the Wandering Aramean, spoke this language and had Aramean ancestry. Aramaic has accompanied the Jews from the time of Abraham to the present day. As part of the Semitic language subfamily, ancient Aramaic presents specific varieties identified as Jewish dialects, as it appears in key Jewish texts such as the Talmud and the Zohar, in addition to being present in various ritual recitations such as the Kaddish. Historically, Aramaic was the predominant language in Talmudic debates within yeshivas, as many rabbinic texts combine Hebrew and Aramaic. In Arab regions like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria, however, Mizrahi Jews predominantly spoke Arabic. Several significant philosophical and religious works by Jews from the Maghreb and the Middle East were written in Arabic using an adapted Hebrew alphabet. In addition to Aramaic and Arabic, in some regions of the Middle East, such as Iran, Mizrahi Jews began speaking a version of Persian known as Jewish Persian or Judeo-Persian, a fusion of Persian and Aramaic. Regarding the genetics of Mizrahi Jews, it is interesting to note that they show a considerable genetic proximity to the ancient Israelites. This is reflected in their physical characteristics, with distinct Semitic features in their faces. Compared to other Jewish groups, such as Ashkenazis, who have significant genetic admixture with Europeans, including Germans and other European peoples, Mizrahi Jews have a genetic constitution more faithful to Semitic origins. This explains the presence of blonde, red-haired and light-eyed Jews among Ashkenazis who do not exhibit as obvious Semitic genetics. When analyzing Mizrahi Jews, one can observe typical Semitic physical traits from the Middle East. Among them are prominent arched noses, thick beards, pronounced dark circles under the eyes, and skin tones ranging from beige to yellowish, easily acquiring a tanned hue under sun exposure. Their dark hair and brown eyes, combined with more slender faces, show striking similarities to other Semitic peoples from the region, such as Arabs, Bedouins, and other Middle Eastern groups. Mizrahi Jews are often mistakenly classified as Arab Jews, an inaccurate designation because, although they share some cultural and physical traits with Arabs, their identity is Jewish. Moreover, their genetic ancestry, in many cases, is even more preserved compared to other Jewish groups. Regarding the maternal mitochondrial lineage of Mizrahi Jews, a study conducted by Behar in 2008 brought significant findings. Approximately 43% of Mizrahi Jews from Iraq and other parts of the Middle East exhibited a significant maternal founding event, with 58.6% of the total variation in their mitochondrial DNA tracing back to a female ancestor from the Levant. In Yemen, research indicates that about 42% of the direct maternal lineages of the Mizrahi Jewish population can be traced back to 5 female ancestors, 4 of whom originate from the Middle East. Genetic studies offer interesting perspectives when comparing Mizrahi Jews to other Jewish groups, such as Ashkenazis. In Ashkenazi Jews, the genetic heritage of European origin mainly comes from the maternal lineage through mitochondrial DNA, while the paternal lineage maintains Semitic roots in the Levant and the Middle East. In contrast, Mizrahi Jews have both matrilineal and patrilineal Semitic ancestry from the region, reinforcing their genetic continuity within the Jewish ethnicity. When it comes to the paternal lineage of Mizrahi Jews from Iraq and Yemen, there is a great similarity with the lineages of Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews, all linked to the Levant of the ancient Middle East, as well as other regions. I thank everyone who has followed this video until now. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share so that more people can access this valuable information about contemporary Jewish groups. May God bless you, and see you soon.